As the U.S. economy moves closer to a slowdown, around a dozen states are expected to feel the effects first, and the consequences could be serious. If you own property in any of these regions, understanding the current situation could be the key to remaining financially secure or facing significant losses. While many real estate agents continue to claim that it's still a good time to buy, recent foreclosure statistics suggest otherwise. Foreclosures rose to 36,766 in October alone, marking a 20% increase compared to last year. At the same time, home prices have started to decline, with the Case-Shiller index showing only a modest 1.5% yearly gain. These warning signals are not evenly distributed. Instead, they are focused in 12 states where three major risks are coming together: increasing foreclosures during what should be a period of economic growth, declining home values that reduce equity and lead to more defaults, and financial strain at the state level that limits effective intervention. Now, let's examine the 12 states already experiencing these challenges, beginning with the five most vulnerable. First is Florida. Currently, Florida ranks #1 in the country for foreclosure activity. As of October 2025, there is one foreclosure for every 1,829 homes, making it the most pressured housing market nationwide. In that single month, the state recorded 5,512 foreclosure filings, a striking number by any measure. What makes the situation even more alarming is that foreclosures are increasing at the same time that property values are falling. Historically, this combination has often led to major housing market downturns. What's unfolding across Florida is far more than a typical slowdown. It signals a much deeper issue. Warning signs are visible throughout the state. In Miami, for instance, homes are now staying on the market for an average of 69 days, the longest duration in the country. Meanwhile, housing supply is rising quickly in several metro areas. Cape Coral has experienced a 51% increase in listings compared to last year. Similarly, Northport and Sarasota have seen a 48% rise, while Fort Lauderdale has recorded a 30% increase in inventory. These are not normal seasonal trends. Instead, they suggest that sellers are rushing to leave the market. Interestingly, this surge in selling is not mainly caused by interest rates. The bigger problem is Florida's insurance crisis, which often doesn't receive enough attention. Homeowner insurance premiums in the state have surged dramatically, with average costs now exceeding $11,000 per year, compared to about $2,500 nationwide. This represents an increase of roughly 340%, placing significant financial pressure on homeowners. For many, keeping their homes no longer makes financial sense, regardless of their mortgage terms. In reality, climate-related risk pricing has finally caught up with Florida, and the effects are severe. Buyers are beginning to step back, long-term residents are deciding to move away, and markets that were once thriving are now reversing direction. The state has even reported a natural population decline of 7,321 people. At the same time, domestic migration has dropped sharply, falling from 222,100 new residents in 2022 to just 68,043 in 2024. Florida's growth model has long depended on a continuous flow of new residents, and that stream is now weakening. Meanwhile, serious mortgage delinquencies are rising in areas where home prices are already declining. When falling property values combined with increasing foreclosures and a shrinking population, it creates a domino effect that destabilizes the entire housing market. Florida is not dealing with just one issue. It is facing multiple major challenges at once, each intensifying the other. That is why it stands out as one of the clearest examples of a housing market beginning to break down in real time. Next on the list is Colorado. The state has experienced one of the most unexpected shocks in the entire country. It posted the highest year-over-year increase in foreclosures nationwide, with filings skyrocketing by an astonishing 145% compared to the previous year. To put that into context, foreclosures didn't just rise slightly, they more than doubled in a market that was once seen as stable and reliable. This sudden change highlights how a market that appears strong on the surface can actually be hiding deeper weaknesses that emerge without much warning. At the same time, Colorado is dealing with serious financial challenges at the state level. In less than a year, it shifted from having a healthy budget surplus to forecasting a $750 million deficit for the 2026 fiscal year. Such a dramatic reversal points to economic pressure that many analysts failed to recognize until it was already underway. Meanwhile, strain on the housing supply continues to grow. Inventory levels have now climbed above pre-pandemic levels seen in 2019, even as foreclosure risks increase, with about 1 in every 4,529 homes currently under distress. All of this is unfolding while Colorado's economy faces uncertainty due to its heavy reliance on the tech industry, along with shifting remote work patterns. Even Denver, which was once a major hotspot for relocation during the pandemic, is beginning to show signs of decline. Office vacancy rates remain elevated, indicating weaker demand and slowing business activity. Much of the state's recent construction surge was built around pandemic-era growth, which is now cooling off, leaving behind clear evidence of overdevelopment in both residential and commercial real estate. The key takeaway here is quite clear. When foreclosure activity more than doubles during what should be a period of economic expansion, a recession doesn't simply slow things down. It can escalate an already fragile situation into a major crisis. Colorado stands as a strong example of the dangers associated with boom and bust cycles, where rapid pandemic-driven growth led to increased spending and expansion. Now that conditions are stabilizing, significant weaknesses in both the housing market and state finances are becoming visible almost overnight. Number 3 is Illinois, where many experts are warning of a looming pension death spiral that is already underway. Currently, the state finds itself in one of the nation's most fragile financial positions. Illinois is grappling with persistently high foreclosure rates while shouldering a massive $144 billion in unfunded pension liabilities. This isn't just a serious problem, it's one that under current circumstances seems almost impossible to fix. Pension funding is only at 46%, leaving Illinois deeply in distressed territory, while total obligations have ballooned to roughly $248.7 billion. Adding to the concern, the state's debt ratio has soared to an extraordinary 468.7%, the highest in the country, underscoring the severity of the crisis. Such financial pressure is already prompting residents to leave. In 2024 alone, 56,235 people moved out of Illinois, marking the third largest population decline in the United States. This migration creates a vicious cycle. As financial strain worsens, more residents depart, shrinking the tax base further. The state is then forced into difficult decisions: raise taxes, which drives even more people away, or cut services, which makes living in the state less appealing. Either choice traps Illinois in a challenging loop. Illinois' decline isn't sudden, but gradual. Pension payments are consuming an ever larger portion of the budget, leaving less money for other programs, all while the number of taxpayers continues to drop. When the housing market starts to falter, the state has almost no financial flexibility to intervene. There is little room for homeowner assistance programs, no additional funding for infrastructure, and virtually no buffer if the economy weakens further. Even though home prices in Chicago have recently increased by 6.4%, that number hides the bigger picture. These gains are layered on top of an already high foreclosure rate. If a recession occurs, Illinois could face a severe correction. Foreclosures are likely to surge, distressed properties could flood the market, housing values may fall rapidly, and the shrinking tax base will worsen, all while the state lacks the financial resources to respond effectively. Number 4 is South Carolina, which could be described as quietly facing a growing crisis. The state is slowly sliding into one of the most serious housing challenges in the country, and much of it is happening under the radar. South Carolina currently ranks second in the nation for foreclosure rates, with one foreclosure for every 1,982 homes. Although it hasn't received much national attention, the pressure on the housing market is significant. Recent reports show over 1,000 foreclosure filings, and the problem isn't confined to a single area. Counties such as Dorchester, Kershaw, Berkeley, and Oconee are all experiencing substantial distress simultaneously. This isn't just a few isolated hotspots. It reflects a wider regional issue affecting multiple areas at the same time. The widespread of foreclosures is particularly concerning. When multiple counties see rising foreclosures, it usually indicates statewide economic stress rather than a local housing problem. South Carolina's economic structure amplifies the risk. The state relies heavily on manufacturing and tourism, industries that are often hit hardest during economic slowdowns. Because its economy isn't very diversified, South Carolina has little protection if the housing market weakens while unemployment rises. The trends in foreclosures make one point very clear. This isn't only a housing issue. It is an early warning of a broader economic slowdown that could accelerate quickly if a recession occurs. States with smaller or mid-sized economies, like South Carolina, typically lack the capacity to absorb widespread economic shocks as effectively as larger, more diversified states. During the next downturn, foreclosure problems could escalate rapidly. Manufacturing may slow, tourism revenues could fall sharply, and the housing market might take hits from multiple directions at once. Without strong financial reserves or a more diversified economy, South Carolina has limited ability to respond, leaving homeowners increasingly exposed as conditions worsen. Number 5 is California, where what is happening can be described as a complex, multi-layered crisis. The state is currently facing one of the most intricate and far-reaching challenges in the country, with multiple major problems occurring at the same time. California is confronting a $58 billion budget deficit, nearly $498 billion in total liabilities, and simultaneously experiencing the largest population decline in the nation. Overall, the state has seen a net loss of 239,500 residents. This shrinking population is eroding the tax base at a time when government spending needs are at their peak, creating a financial situation that is difficult to reconcile. Housing supply throughout the state has also expanded dramatically. Active listings have surged, with some counties seeing inventory more than double. San Bernardino County saw a 120% increase in listings. Kings County rose by 130%, and Ventura County experienced a 50% jump. At the same time, homes are taking considerably longer to sell. The average time on the market has climbed 41%, from 22 days to 31 days. In a state known for fast-paced, highly competitive housing markets, this shift indicates a significant release of pressure rather than a minor slowdown. The labor market is showing signs of stress as well. California's unemployment rate has risen to 5.5%, the second highest in the nation, while several major metropolitan areas are already seeing declines in home prices. For instance, San Luis Obispo dropped 1.9% and Sacramento fell 1.8%, demonstrating that the weakness is not isolated but spreading. The ongoing departure of businesses is worsening the situation. Between 2011 and 2021, 789 companies relocated out of California. And from 2018 to 2023, 8 Fortune 500 headquarters left the state, a trend that has accelerated in recent years. Unfunded pension obligations add another layer of strain, estimated at roughly $265 billion. As both residents and businesses continue to exit, the shrinking tax base leaves officials with difficult choices, either cut services or raise taxes, both of which risk driving even more people and companies out. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where financial stress and housing instability feed on each other, worsening both issues over time. Finally, if you found this breakdown helpful, supporting the channel by liking and subscribing helps keep detailed content like this coming. Each like, share, and subscription makes it possible to continue producing this kind of in-depth coverage. Thank you for sticking with it. Let's continue moving forward. Number 6 is Delaware, a small state facing disproportionately high risk. Its limited size actually makes the situation more fragile than it might appear at first. Recently, Delaware recorded the highest bankruptcy rate in the country, with more than 1,200 filings in 2024, up sharply from 897 the year before. That means over 1% of all businesses in the state went bankrupt in just a single year, a clear sign that financial pressure is building beneath the surface. At the same time, the housing market is beginning to weaken. Along with these business struggles, Delaware now ranks among the states with the highest foreclosure rates, with 1 in every 2,617 homes affected. Unemployment has also risen, moving from 3.7% to 4.3%, adding further strain to households that are already stretched financially. In a state as small as Delaware, problems like these cannot remain contained. There isn't enough economic scale or diversification to absorb shocks, so disruptions hit harder and spread more quickly than they would in larger states. The risk is further heightened by Delaware's proximity to other struggling states, including Pennsylvania, Maryland, and New Jersey, where economic and housing issues can easily spill over. Taken together, these factors make Delaware especially vulnerable to a chain reaction of financial problems. If nearby regions continue to weaken, the state has very little ability to slow the impact, meaning even a modest downturn could escalate into a much more serious crisis once a broader recession occurs. Number 7 is Nevada, a state whose economy is heavily reliant on tourism and is now beginning to show clear signs of strain. The state is under pressure as its visitor-dependent system starts to lose stability. In 2024, Nevada recorded the highest annual unemployment rate in the country at 5.6%, and it remains elevated at roughly 5.3% today. The strain in the labor market is already affecting the housing sector, with prices starting to drop in key regions. In Reno, home values have declined by approximately 3.6%, bringing the median price down to about $612,200. Las Vegas is also seeing a slowdown, with home prices slipping 0.5% to around $481,000. While these declines may appear modest at first glance, in a market that depends on continuous demand and quick turnover, even small reductions can be early indicators of deeper problems ahead. Nevada's greatest vulnerability comes from its heavy reliance on industries such as gaming, hospitality, and tourism. These sectors thrive when consumers have disposable income, but they are usually the first to suffer when spending tightens. As discretionary income decreases, Nevada's economic engine begins to slow. The state's dependence on visitors from other parts of the country makes it even more fragile, especially as many of those regions are now facing their own economic and housing challenges. As these areas weaken, fewer tourists travel, consumer spending falls, and Nevada faces a double impact. In the event of a recession, this kind of economic structure makes the state particularly exposed to a rapid and potentially severe downturn. Number 8 is Texas, where the effects of overbuilding are finally becoming apparent. The state is facing the consequences of constructing too many homes too quickly, and the imbalance in the market is becoming impossible to ignore. Currently, Texas ranks as the 4th most oversupplied housing market in the country, with inventory about 53% above normal levels. By April 2025, active listings had climbed to roughly 123,000 homes, flooding the market just as buyer demand started to ease. A key factor in this shift is the sharp decline in migration. Net domestic migration into Texas dropped by 62%, falling from pandemic-era highs of 222,100 new residents to only 85,200 in 2024. In other words, developers and policymakers were preparing for growth that is no longer materializing. Despite this slowdown, construction continued at a rapid pace. Texas accounted for 15% of all new home permits issued nationwide, adding even more supply to an already crowded market. The impact is especially visible in Austin, where home prices are projected to fall about 12.2% as the typical overbuilding cycle unfolds. But this isn't just a housing problem. Timing is a major factor. Texas expanded under the assumption that population growth would continue indefinitely. Now that growth is leveling off and economic conditions are softening, the excess supply is finally catching up with the market. What once seemed like unstoppable expansion is now turning into a challenging and potentially painful correction. Number 9 is New York, where a cascading crisis is spreading from commercial real estate into the broader economy. In Manhattan, office vacancy rates now range between 17% and nearly 19.6%. Class A office rents have fallen by 6.8% to 8% compared to last year. These declines come at a time when the state is carrying roughly $368 billion in total debt, along with the $34.3 billion structural deficit, leaving very little flexibility to absorb additional shocks. Population losses make the situation even more concerning. In just 1 year, New York lost 120,917 residents, marking the second largest domestic outflow in the nation. A significant portion of that wealth went with them, including $13.7 billion in personal income that moved to Florida alone. This exodus simultaneously weakens both consumer spending and the state's tax base. When commercial real estate weakens, the consequences extend beyond the sector. Declining office values affect property owners as well as the banks and lenders financing these buildings. As downtown business districts struggle, the ripple effects spread to residential housing, local jobs, and municipal revenue. What's occurring in New York is a classic example of a cascading failure. As commercial hubs deteriorate, housing markets lose support, financial institutions incur losses, and urban economies begin to hollow out. Once this process accelerates, it becomes extremely difficult to halt, especially in a state already burdened by debt, deficits, and accelerating outmigration. Number 10 is New Jersey, a state caught in a high-stakes clash between pension obligations and rising foreclosures. Long-term pension liabilities are colliding with mounting housing stress, creating a fragile financial squeeze. New Jersey currently has roughly $92 billion in unfunded pension obligations, which equals about $9,688 per resident. At the same time, the state now ranks among those with the highest foreclosure rates in the country, even though home prices have still increased by 8.1%. That apparent contradiction highlights deeper financial strain beneath the surface. The labor market is not offering much relief either. Unemployment has climbed from 4.6% to 5%, adding extra pressure to households already burdened by the nation's highest property taxes. For many residents, rising taxes and living costs are erasing the gains from higher home values, leaving little room for financial flexibility. The pension challenge itself is particularly difficult to resolve. Closing the funding gap would require either massive tax hikes or significant cuts to benefits, both politically unpopular options in a state already struggling with housing pressures. This combination makes New Jersey especially vulnerable. Rising foreclosures, even amid climbing prices, indicate that the underlying financial system is fragile. If economic conditions worsen or a recession hits, that delicate balance could break, turning pension obligations and housing instability into a self-reinforcing crisis. Number 11 is Connecticut, a state caught in what analysts are calling a demographic death spiral. Long-term decline is being driven by a dangerous mix of heavy debt, population loss, and an aging population. Connecticut now carries about $27,310 in total liabilities per resident, the highest per capita burden in the nation, including roughly $37 billion in unfunded pension obligations. Even under ideal circumstances, that level of debt would be challenging to manage, but the state's demographic trends make it nearly impossible to solve. Between 2020 and 2023, Connecticut lost around 21,000 residents, and there's no sign that this decline is slowing. At the same time, the population continues to age. With fewer working-age residents supporting a growing number of retirees, the state's fiscal situation becomes increasingly unsustainable. Economic pressures are already showing up in both the labor and credit markets. Unemployment has climbed from 3.2% to 3.8%, and Moody's has downgraded several utility companies in the state, indicating that financial stress is spreading beyond government obligations. The housing market is caught squarely in the middle of this slow decline. High costs are driving younger families to move elsewhere, while older homeowners eventually put their properties up for sale in a market facing declining demand. The result isn't a sudden crash. Instead, it's a slow-moving housing crisis, where shrinking demographics steadily undermine home values, liquidity, and long-term market stability. Number 12 is Arizona, a state where housing affordability has essentially collapsed. Homes have become largely out of reach for most residents. In 2024, Arizona closed a $1.4 billion budget gap, but it did so without leaving any meaningful financial cushion. At the same time, housing costs have surged so sharply that the state shifted from being generally affordable to largely unaffordable in just a few years, particularly between 2019 and 2023. Signs of a housing slowdown are already apparent locally. In Tucson, for example, home prices have declined by 2.1%, bringing the median value to about $381,400. Looking forward, CoreLogic projects over a 70% chance that prices will continue to fall, showing that the correction is far from complete. State fiscal policy has left Arizona vulnerable at precisely the wrong time. The 2021 flat income tax cut reduced ongoing revenue just as spending pressures were mounting. While manageable in stronger economic periods, this now leaves the state with little flexibility to respond if recession pressures increase. With affordability already stretched, home prices weakening, and fiscal flexibility exhausted, Arizona enters the next economic downturn with few tools to cushion the impact. Homeowners and the broader housing market face heightened risk. Taken together, these 12 states represent the most dangerous mix possible: rising foreclosures, falling home prices, fiscal constraints that prevent meaningful intervention, and economies highly sensitive to recession. Track your local market data and understand your state's financial health. The lesson is clear. This isn't hypothetical. The housing crisis is real, happening now, and accelerating fastest in these particularly vulnerable states. What warning signs do you see in your area? Share your state in the comments and let us know if this November 2025 data matches your experience. If this breakdown helped you understand the situation, hit like and subscribe for ongoing market insights. This isn't speculation. The housing crisis is already unfolding in these 12 states. Subscribe, share, and check out the next video for even more detailed coverage.